Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Obviously, no loadout in Warzone is complete without a secondary. The beauty of that, though, is the fact that we have so many different options for solid secondaries. You can go ahead, you can use an actual secondary like a pistol, or you can toss on overkill, you can grab another loadout, and actually use two primary weapons as well that complement each other in various ways. So today we are basically breaking down the top secondaries to use in Warzone right now. We're breaking down a handful of the best pistol setups, some of the better rifles and SMGs for close range fights and for secondary complements, all sorts of really good setups today. So as we go through them all, if you enjoy the video at any point, or if you just find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't already subscribed, I am always covering everything going on in COD. News, intel, updates, loadouts, it's all right here. So feel free to subscribe. That way you can always stay up to date. All right, so first up, I wanted to break down the actual best secondaries, strictly looking at the pistols here. Yeah, you could use some launchers here and there. You could use the Cali sticks, but obviously when it comes to just trying to frag out and get the most kills and have the most optimal and the most versatile setup, you're probably going to be going with a pistol if you want a true secondary here. So there's actually a handful of pistols that are really good right now. I would say number one in the game currently is the Sykov, especially because it's fully automatic. It's just really easy to use. It's reliable, it's consistent. You can't really go wrong with it. Unfortunately, it's a bit slower than some of the other options, especially with the setup that we've got here. But overall, I mean, the Sykov, it's a beast, especially up close. It's gonna fry. You have that 80 round mag option on there, so you don't have to worry about ammo. Like, all around, this is a great setup. And when it comes to the overall attachment list here, of course, we've got the monolithic suppressor. That's sort of a no-brainer. We like to stay off the radar. It also helps out with the range a little bit too, so that's a nice bonus. We've got the 140 millimeter automatic barrel. This to me is the game changer here. It makes it fully auto, which makes it so much easier to use. It can better compete with SMGs. It gives you a better chance against things like shotguns. All around, this makes the weapon way more effective. Like I said, we've got the 80 round drums on there. You could always go for the 20 round mag. You're going to be way faster when it comes to overall mobility, but of course, you're going to be reloading a lot more too. You're not going to have the ability to get, you know, a double kill, maybe a triple kill, a squad wipe if you need to finish up some kills here and there. So 80, I feel like, gives you that sort of comfortability there. It helps out. It's a nice, you know, safety net in a sense. I've also got the Priz Rack grip on there. This is going to help out with the mobility some. Then personally, I primarily use this as a fully loaded setup. That's where I'm using most of my pistols as is. But if you don't want to use fully loaded, you could always go for something like the 5mm laser if you plan on hip firing some. You could go with the trigger, but I don't think it helps out with the automatic barrel. So I'd say a laser is probably your best bet. Maybe tac laser for a bit better mobility. But like I said, 5mm is probably going to be the go-to there, strictly for the better accuracy. Now, the other fully auto pistol we have is, of course, the AMP63, the brand new pistol for Season 3. And when it comes to the comparison versus the Sykov, each have their pros, each have their cons. The Sykov, I feel like, is, you know, better for a more aggressive player just because you have the larger magazine. It's got the faster fire rate. However, it's going to be a bit slower, like I said. This, though, the AMP63, it's got the smaller magazine, but your mobility is a bit better. But I say the Sykov is probably better for the more aggressive player because you're going to challenge more enemies without having to worry about backing out, reloading, you know, resetting up the fight. Whereas this is pretty much like a one-and-done type of deal, especially with how the recoil works. What you need to actually knock an enemy, like, you have to be pretty accurate with this one. The Sykov, I would say, is way more forgiving. So the AMP63, close in terms of, you know, competitiveness with the Sykov. I would say the Sykov is slightly better though, but the M63, a great alternative. It's better for mobility, like I said. And when it comes to the setup here, we've actually got the sound suppressor. It's going to help out with the mobility, then do the same thing as like the monolithic or the agency would with keeping us off the mini-map. I've also got the task force barrel on there, better range, better strafe speed, just helps out, you know, in a lot of ways there. If you're not using an akimbo Cold War pistol, I'd probably say task force is the go-to for the barrel option every single time. I've also got the Ember sighting point for the slightly better range. You could also go with, I think, the target designator as well. It does the same thing with less cons, so sort of up to you there. I've also got the 23 round fast mag. It's going to be the second biggest option here, but you do have that faster reload. Then, of course, I've also got the Serpent Wrap on there for better ADS time. I wouldn't really recommend running dual wield on these. The Sykovs you could maybe get away with using dual wield, but the AMP63 I just feel like is way too unforgiving to have two pistols and, you know, less accuracy than with just the solo one here. So I'd rock the solo. This is a pretty solid pistol when it comes down to it. Now, another pistol that I feel like people are sort of sleeping on as of late is the Diamatti, the Diamatti Spaghetti, as we once called it. This thing is like a pretty consistent 2 to 3 burst kill up close. Like, it is actually kind of a melt machine. It was like the go-to pistol when the Cold War integration first happened. The akimbo diamattis were just insane. The TTK was nuts. Now though, I would opt for the single option, no akimbo anymore, but even as a single pistol, this thing is a fantastic secondary. This, I would say, is probably my favorite of all the actual pistol options here, just because I feel the most comfortable with this in my hands. But is it easier to use than the Sykov? Probably not, just because it's not fully auto. It is burst, so you have to sort of take that into consideration. But as far as the attachments go here, once again, we're using the sound suppressor, same reasons as before. We've got the task force barrel, again, for all the same reasons as before. Ember sighting point for that better range yet again. But target designator could be like a solid alternative too. Here I've got the 30 round mag. I don't feel like you really need the fast mag here. The reload is pretty quick as is. Then finally, I've got the serpent grip yet again for slightly better mobility. Like I said, super consistent pistol up close. Absolutely love this thing. It's honestly a beast. And then to round out the actual pistols here, you have the king of the TTKs, I would say, in the pistol category, the Akimbo M19s. These things are insane up close. They will delete people. Of course, you gotta sort of spam your trigger or your mouse, depending on what, input you play on. But if you're in a close range fight, these things will delete people. Obviously, though, they are limited to just close range, and very close range at that. Akimbo does not have the best accuracy. Even with the laser sight on there, it's going to be relatively unforgiving if you're not able to, trace a player very well with like a center mass, a chest placed crosshair there. So you got to be pretty accurate. Your player tracking and tracing has to be pretty solid, but the M19 is a very rewarding weapon if you're able to do well with it. It is a melt machine. So when it comes to the attachments here, again, we've got the monolithic suppressor. I've got the super barrel on there for better range and control. The control factor there is not huge, but it's, it's an added bonus regardless. Of course, we got the 5mm laser since we're exclusively hip firing here. We've got the 32 round mags because honestly, why not? And then of course, we've got the Akimbo perk on there as well because 2 is definitely better than 1. Now, there's 2 specific rifles that I want to focus on as really good secondary options. You have to build them to be a bit more mobile, but the first one here is of course the AK-47. This I feel like is the best secondary rifle you could possibly use in the game right now. You're going to be using this either as a complement to another rifle like say the AMAX or as something like a sniper complement, so you're using the Swiss or the HDR or the CAR or whatever the case may be there. This thing though is insanely good for an AK-47. We're not really used to having AKs so good as close range options, but here in Warzone in the current meta, the AK-47, when you build it to be fast, when you build it to be aggressive, is an absolute beast. It's got the high damage. The TTK on it is surprisingly good despite having the lower RPM. So as a secondary, the AK-47 is very competitive. Here we're using the base suppressor, not the GRU, because of course we want that better mobility and we want to stay off the map still. I've got the Spetsnaz RPK barrel on there for the better range and velocity. So if you find yourself in a medium range fight, you can still sort of compete, but this also increases the strafe speed, which is a huge help. Personally, I use the Tiger Team Spotlight paired with the Bruiser grip to really maximize the mobility there. If you're not comfortable with a recoil though, swap out Bruiser for Spetsnaz. I would try and keep the Tiger Team just because that added mobility I feel like is a huge bonus, especially up close when you're using this as a secondary. You want that speed. Then finally, I've got the 45 round speed mag. You could always go bigger up to like 60, but you are going to be a bit slower. I feel like though, this as a secondary setup is insanely fun and it's extremely dominant. Then the other rifle that I feel like is great as a secondary, again, either as like a complement to another rifle or better yet, a sniper complement, the Ram 7. This thing has really sort of risen up in ranks recently. People are using it more as a primary and as a secondary just because it's really starting to sort of get its time in the spotlight, you could say, because the RAM is actually really good. The TTK, fantastic. The control, honestly, not that bad. It's a bit more than something like the Kilo or the Grau, but certainly controllable once you get that pattern down. The range on it, surprisingly good, and the mobility also relatively decent for a rifle. This is really my go-to sniper complement setup here. Monolithic suppressor, of course, no brainer. I actually use the Eclipse barrel just because it's going to be slightly faster than the Ranger barrel here. Of course, you don't get the added control bonus, but we make up for that with the Commando foregrip. I've also got the 50 round mags and the tack laser. That's going to help out with the speed and the stability some. And when you're using this in those close and medium range fights, this setup is fantastic. The iron sights are pretty clean, so it's relatively easy to stay on target. Like I said, you pair this with something like a CAR or a Swiss, you've got a very aggressive, very consistent, and very reliable setup. And then to round things out for the best secondaries in the game right now, of course, we've got a handful of SMGs that are probably going to be the primary selections here throughout the community. Most of the time, you're probably running a rifle with an SMG, an LMG with an SMG. That's normally the go-to. First up, we've got the MAC-10. I love this thing, especially this setup. This is a run and gun, push until you can't anymore sort of setup. It is all about just being as aggressive as possible, trying to, get into the enemy's, little personal bubble, force them out of their comfort zone. This is by far my favorite secondary setup, I think. We've got the sound suppressor on the MAC-10, the task force barrel. Once again, we're using the Tiger team and the striker, which is basically just like the bruiser over on the AK-47 setup. So these two together are going to make you fly. I believe this setup in particular here is one of the fastest in the game. You can outrun the train, I'm pretty sure. This, I feel like in the walking speed is actually faster than the PKM's sprinting speed, I think is what True Game Data said at one point. So this is the flash in the form of a weapon to round things out. We also have the 53 round drum on there. One of the best close range weapons, fantastic for just finessing players, getting from point A to point B very, very quickly. By far one of the best rotational setups in the game. I absolutely love it. Another super consistent secondary is going to be the Modern Warfare MP5. Here we've got the monolithic integral suppressor, the 5 milliwatt laser because this thing is a hip fire machine. The Merc foregrip also helps out with that a little bit. We've got the 45 round mags. Then you can either go with like sleight of hand, you could go with the collapsible stock, you could go with the icon, the stippy grippy. Sort of up to you there. I like the faster reload. I feel like it's a bit better for an aggressive player. If you're not super aggressive though, definitely opt for like the stock or the stipple grip tape instead. But this thing, like I said, just super consistent. Nothing really new here. This has been one of the best secondary setups for like the past 14 months. So no surprise to see this one in the best secondary list, but nonetheless, have to mention it. It's always a great choice. Now going from Modern Warfare to Cold War, we've got that version of the MP5. This one is actually a beast. One of the best TTKs in the game in terms of close range fights. The Cold War MP5 will just delete people again faster than most of the other SMG choices we have in the game right now. What's extra curious about this setup though is the lack of a barrel. Obviously, on pretty much every single SMG in the game, Cold War SMG in the game, I should say, you want to be using Task Force. In this case, though, it's not entirely necessary. The TTK is good enough without it. You don't necessarily need that added range just because this is primarily a close range weapon, especially with the recoil. It's just not super optimal for medium range fights. So no barrel, you get an extra attachment elsewhere instead. And again, we're sort of going for speed, but we're also going for somewhat ease of use. We've got the sound suppressor, better mobility. It's going to make us faster all around, keep us off the minimap. Again, Tiger team and the bruiser for the way better mobility. Again, you can fly with this thing. 50 round drum, we're going for double kills, triple kills, cleanups, all sorts of stuff like that. And then you can sort of mess around with the final attachment. I go for the Raider stock, better sprint to fire, better ADS movement speed. You could go for something like the Serpent Grip if you wanted a better ADS time. You could use an optic if you don't like the iron sights, but the point of not using a barrel here is to also capitalize on the blueprint iron sights as well. As you guys can see, they're like cleaner there. There's no top half to it. It's really convenient, I would say. This is another fantastic secondary option. Great for running with an AMAX, even a primary RAM setup. Could be a sniper complement if you're more aggressive. Very reliable in all sorts of ways like that. And then finally, we've got the AK-74U. Of course, we just talked about this last week. This thing's TTK is surprisingly good. It's like the Bullfrog 2.0 in the sense of if you hit headshots, this thing is going to fry everyone and everything. The headshots here are the main factor. This setup, despite not being the most optimal for recoil, I feel like is very easy to use. Again, we're using the sound suppressor and the task force. No surprises there. Tiger team and bruiser yet again, but like I said, if you really want to optimize it for recoil control so that landing headshots is a bit easier and more consistent for you, go for Spetsnaz grip. That'll help out with the control factor there. But I like the mobility. You guys, I'm sure, can tell that by now. And then lastly, we've got the 50 round drum on there. Pretty basic ammo upgrade to round things out. So yeah, with all of that being said, those are the best secondaries to be using here in Warzone right now. Let me know down in the comments below which of these weapons is your favorite to use, at least in the current meta. But that is going to wrap things up for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, or if you found it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't already subscribed, feel free to subscribe. That way you can always stay up to date with everything going on in COD. Once again, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.